Welcome to the Jameson Files. I'm your host, Carrie Weber, and it's so great to be back with you as we have an amazing guest with us. Dayna Johnson is with us today. Dayna is a good friend of mine. We've known each other for several years now, right, Dayna? And
Yes.
yeah, and when you're all in the same realm in dentistry and in consulting and working with dental practices, you can't help but become friends when you're on the road speaking and consulting. And for those of you that may not be familiar with Dayna has a consulting company called Novonee, and Dayna's background is pretty incredible as a Dentrix trainer. Moving into consulting, some of your accolades are Dentrix Trainer of the Year, top 25 women in dentistry.
Yes.
And so it's a real honor to have you on as a guest, Dayna. Thank you so much for being with me.
Well, thank you for having me. When you were talking about me being on the Jameson Files when we were in Hinman, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. And I am super excited to share some experiences with all your audience.
Yes. And, for those of you that may be like, what's this Novonee? There are times when I'm talking with practices and their specific need is around getting team onboarded and utilizing Dentrix in a maximized way, and becoming more efficient, more effective in their work, especially in the business side of the practice, with their practice management software. And boy, that's when your name comes up a lot, Dayna, because you excel in your expertise and in your ability to give instruction that's not only helpful for team to learn, but you also help them know how to apply it and implement it, which is the key. So that leads us to today's conversation. Something that you've been talking about a little bit more recently is workflows and what that means in dental practices, what practices are struggling with. So as we step into that conversation, which I'm actually really excited about, I'd love to hear what's led to this element of what you're instructing and teaching practices. What is it that you're finding in the dental practices today that has really put an emphasis on helping them build out workflows in the practice?
Yeah, thank you. It has, there's been kind of these 3 layers that I've been noticing across our industry. New team members coming into dentistry for the very first time. I have several practices, and so do you probably, with new team members who are coming from retail, or they're coming from medical, or they're coming from another industry, and they have no idea about how to work the front desk in a dental practice. And so a lot of times what happens is you hire this new team member and you kind of throw them out to the sharks, and with no training, no onboarding. And they're like, what do I do? So these new team members are really looking for help. They're looking for onboarding. They're looking for training. And that's kind of the first layer I'm seeing a lot of. And then we're also seeing a lot of team members, whether they're a dental assistant moving up to the front desk, or maybe somebody that started out as a amazing receptionist and now she's being promoted up to a treatment coordinator, and she's like, I don't know what this job is supposed to do, help me. And then the third layer I'm seeing is a lot of doctors reaching out to me and really wanting to be more involved with what should my team be doing every day, every week, every month. I have no idea. I'm in the back treating patients, but I really want to have a more hands-on approach. And so I've been having a lot of doctors reach out to me and saying, what should the daily, weekly, monthly workflow even look like? It's been really, really great. And because I can help with all of that. So it's been really fun.
I'm curious, when you go into conversations about workflows, are there some specific ones that you see the most frequently non-existent in a practice? Or, I always talk about when there's a lack of intentionality, a lack of process, typically how that shows up in practices that are lacking systems, processes, workflows is chaos.
Yes.
Or a lot of people throwing their own past experiences into the pot and just hoping it all works out, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see it show up the most in the work that you do, a little bit of that accidental workflow or lack of workflows, so to speak?
Yeah, I really see it showing up with, a lot of frustration, a lot of feeling overwhelmed, stretched. I feel like what you said, a lot of people are reverting back to their old way. Like,
Mhm.
this is how I used to do it. I'm just going to go back to this way. I'm going to pull out my 3-ring binder and start writing down patient names because I don't know how to do it in the software. And so I'm just going to go backwards. But then, I find that they're spending enormous amount of time, because anytime you have that manual system, it takes 3 times longer to do it. So team members are getting to the end of the day and they're like, I worked 8 hours today and I don't feel like I got anything done. Or they're getting home late to their families, and then they get home and they're frustrated. And so I,
Mhm.
I feel like team members are just kind of at their wits' end, like, I don't know what to do, and so then
Yeah.
they leave
Mhm.
because they don't know what else to do, and they're not getting the training and support that they really are asking for.
Yes. And 2 out of the 3 main areas that you're seeing these requests or needs for workflow training and clarification are in that onboarding process, either
Yes.
hiring a brand new employee or bringing a person that's on the team but into a completely new role, which still demands
Hmm.
training on as if you're onboarding them into as a new employee, because they're entering into a whole new realm of the practice.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's interesting. I think you probably say this too, especially when it comes to practice management software or any of the softwares, tools, technology.
Hmm.
If we were to step into anybody's practice, the likelihood is that they're all only utilizing it at a fraction
Hmm.
of the capabilities that tool has for them to be efficient
Yeah,
and successful.
for sure. 15 to 20%. Most offices are only using about 15 to 20% of the software's capabilities.
Wow. What are maybe 1 or 2 of the things that are huge missed opportunities that you see again and again for those 15 to 20% utilization practices?
Yeah, definitely what I see is, really the operational side of the
Mm,
practice. I talk about that in the weekly, kind of the weekly workflow is the operational side. That is keeping your schedule full and productive, and keeping money in the bank.
mm,
And so, those two things, being productive and collecting what you produce, is that all happens in that weekly workflow. Most teams that I go in to work with, or maybe I do a practice assessment, or I'm just having a discovery call with a doctor. Most practices do not know the reports or the lists that they can generate out of their own practice management software to find patients that are unscheduled. They have post-it notes all over their desks for their patients that want to come in sooner. So I'm like, I remember walking into an office in Alaska once, and on the back side of when you walk in, you have cabinets and stuff where all the office supplies are, and there were color-coded post-it notes everywhere. And I'm like,
oh.
oh, that's beautiful. Tell me what that is. And they're like, oh, those are all the patients that want to come in sooner. And I'm like, well, you have an
Oh.
ASAP list for that, right? And so they just didn't even know what the ASAP list was. And so then I see millions of dollars sitting on the treatment manager of patients that have unscheduled treatment, and they just don't know that these reports or these lists even exist. And so that's where the 15 to 20% comes from,
Right.
because they just don't know what they don't know.
Right. They're barely using it for its scheduling functionality. They're
Exactly.
they're barely documenting what they need to have documented in there for each patient record.
Right.
Um,
I know.
and
Yeah.
I think that's something else that I thought about when you were talking about the chaos and the stress and the overwhelm. So many practices are living almost in a little bit of a digital purgatory. They want to go paperless, or they want to be more digital. They want to maximize the tool, but like you said, they get overwhelmed and they revert back to those old habits, and so they're
Mhm.
often doing both. So
Yes.
the inefficiencies
Yes.
of double work, because they're like,
Yes.
well, I put it in the computer, but then I write it down over
I
here so that we have easier. And we're like, why are you doing it twice?
I know. And I go, redundancy will kill you. you know?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Redundancy will kill you. And I think it's, a little bit of a case of that we've always done it this way,
Hmm.
or this
Yes.
is the way so and so wants it done, right? Or whatever the case may be. But it's almost like they haven't fully embraced, or they don't fully believe
Hmm.
in the tool to
Yeah.
to go directly and say, this is where we're going to put it, this is how we're going to do it, and
Yeah.
eliminate that extra work.
And what happens is you have an outgoing, for example, let's say you have an outgoing office manager or treatment coordinator who is now training the new person coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So your outgoing office manager, she only uses 15 to 20% of the software. And
Yes.
now she's training your new person.
So you're
And
just passing on the bad habits.
yeah, and so your new person now has learned 15 to 20% of what the software can do, but she's only going to retain about 30% of that. Because we know learning retention is only about 30% unless you have repetition and learning. So
Mm-hmm.
she's only gonna retain about 30% of what she's taught. So now subtract out the 70% that she's already forgotten, so and then there's just this cascading, there's this dilution of knowledge
Yes.
because of the way that we're training our teams.
The
And
dilution of knowledge. I hope everybody that's watching or listening is understanding, when you when you teach a limited amount to a person and you pass that on, they're only going to retain a limited amount of the limited amount that you taught.
exactly.
And
And that's what's happening
yeah,
in our industry. And it's been happening for a long time,
yes,
but I think we're really starting to notice it now because of the high turnover that we're
yes.
seeing. Because, I've been really kind of immersing myself in these studies, and I read a study from this HR magazine company outside of dentistry. It wasn't a dental study, it was a general HR study across businesses. And 40% of team members will leave within the first 90 days without proper training and team development.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you're going to lose 40% of your team within the
Mm-hmm.
first 90 days if you don't train them.
I think it is one of the most commonly overlooked pieces of practice success.
Yeah.
You and I both lecture across the country, and I ask this question quite often to audiences. How many of you would confidently raise your hand? Yes. When I ask you, do you have a clear and intentional training and onboarding process for new employees into your practice?
Yeah.
Rarely do people raise their hands.
Right.
And because they recognize they either were onboarded, more, thrown into the fire, which is, the cliff effect of
Yes.
onboarding team members. We've been without this position for so long. We're just so stinking glad to have a warm body in the seat. And if they said they had dental experience on their resume, great. We don't have to teach them anything. But we both know that that's not true if you want to keep any kind of consistency and cohesiveness in your systems, in your practice.
Exactly.
So when you talk about workflows, you said the weekly workflows that some of those operations pieces are part of. Tell me a little bit more about specific workflows you want practices giving attention to.
So if we kind of back up a little and we start with the daily, I mean, every day, every single day, there's 4 things that I teach my teams. And the daily routine, I think about it as like the accounting process. This is what you need to do every day so that like none of the production or collections is missed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing is balance your day. I'm even shocked at how many people don't run a day sheet every day.
Right.
Balance every procedure. Is it in the clinical note? Is it assigned to the right provider? Did you post all the payments correctly to the right provider? What does the adjustments look like? So someone on the team, and sometimes you can delegate the day sheet. It's called the day sheet in Dentrix. It could be something different in your software. Maybe you delegate the hygienist has their own day sheet they have to do every day and sign off on it, and so the day sheet is number one. Within 24 hours of the data service, you have a balanced day sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as you have a balanced day sheet, you can send your e-claims. And e-claims, electronic claims, go out within 24 hours of the data service.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of team members are saying, well, I have to wait for my doctor to get the clinical notes done. And I'm like, well, then doctors that are listening, get your clinical notes done, because
Yes.
you are not going to get paid for that crown or that implant placement until your clinical note is done, because that
Yes.
clinical note has to be attached to the claim. So if you're sitting on your clinical notes for a week,
Right.
that's a week longer that money's not sitting in your bank account.
Well, and let's face it, how many of us are fresh on the memory train a week after we did something?
Right.
We've all said that to ourselves. We have some notes jotted down over here. And we're like, oh, I'll put this in the system in a few days. And then we get to that point, we're like, what did I mean by this?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was happening here? I mean, how many patients
know.
does that doctor see between this Monday and next Monday?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're playing a little bit of roulette there of
Yeah.
hoping that we're going to be as specific and clear as we need to be. And if you're dependent upon that documentation for anything with if you're in insurance networks, I mean, those are key for you.
For sure. And, if you have good templates,
Mm-hmm.
there's no reason why that clinical note can't be completed, at least the bones of the note. I mean, you may have to like put some flesh on the bones later, but the bones of the note should be completed before you walk your patient up to the front desk. I mean, it's just, if you have good clinical notes, there's no reason why that can't happen.
So Dayna, you make it sound so simple.
Well,
you make it sound so simple. So why does it not get done?
Exactly. I have no clue, because,
you're like, that's why I'm in business.
It is simple. It is simple. But I think that people, you just get the excuses that we're busy. We don't have time. I'll do it later. And a lot of it's about time management.
Absolutely. Time management. And to your point, I think the overwhelm, when you don't have systems in place, when you don't have set workflows, you're inconsistent.
Yes.
So
yeah. And then a lot of times when you don't have systems and processes, you have to kind of think about, okay, what do I need to do next? Okay.
Yes.
How do I do that again? But when you're consistent and you're doing things the same every day, you do these 4 things every single day, you get pretty darn good at it.
Yes.
You become a master at something when you do something every single day consistently.
Yes.
So balance your day sheet, send your e-claims within 24 hours. The third thing is optional, but I do teach it to all my teams, and that is doing what's called allocations. So you're making sure that the payments have been allocated to the right provider. And there's a system inside of Dentrix that makes it really easy to do that. I always say that's optional because not every office does that, but it's part of my 4 things. And then the 4th thing that happens every single day is we generate billing statements every day. And some people look at me like, what? We only do statements once a month. And I'm like, great. Every patient is still on a 30-day cycle. They're only still getting a statement every 30 days. But when you do it every day, then, you might go through 2 statements today, or tomorrow you might have to go through 4 statements, so it makes it so it's not such a big project.
Yes.
And so I make sure that that's part of my daily.
I love that. Make it a habit, stay on top of it so that you don't have this snowball occur. And that really reduces the risk of overwhelm.
Yes.
The risk of falling behind and to stay on top of things. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked on the weekly piece, you talked briefly about those operations pieces.
Yeah.
What else? Any other missing pieces on that recommendation front?
Yeah, for sure. So the weekly process, it's not so much that you do the same thing every single day, but what
Mm-hmm.
I do tell my teams is I want you, like if you're the hygiene coordinator, for example, and you have to make sure your hygiene schedule is full, making sure you're following up with unscheduled continuing care patients, hygiene patients, then I want to see like a couple times a week you're spending, 30 to 45 minutes uninterrupted. I call it off the floor time.
Mm.
I want that team member off the front line, off the front desk, in a back room on a phone or doing texting or something where they're just focusing on reaching out to unscheduled hygiene patients. Because a lot of times what I see happen is we rely so much on our automations, we forget that patients ignore our automations. And,
Yes.
so we have to actually, maybe we have to pick up the phone old school and call a patient or something. So I really want my team members to get some of that off the floor time because I can guarantee you if you spend 30 to 45 minutes of uninterrupted time, you will get more done during that time than, trying to just connect with patients while patients are checking in and checking out and the phones are ringing and all of that. So I
Yes.
really I really try and get my teams to maybe have their own little morning huddle. Like after the main morning huddle, I like my front desk or my admin team to have their own kind of little morning huddle and say, okay, I'm going to spend 45 minutes between this time. I'm going to be in the back room if you guys need me. And then, they can cover the floor, cover the front desk. And if they support each other, then the treatment coordinator can spend her time reaching out to patients that have unscheduled treatment.
Yes.
And I'd like to see that a couple times a week,
Mm-hmm.
when they see that there are some times in the day that might be a little bit more quiet, where you're not having 10 people at the front desk all at the
Right.
same time. So a couple times a week, that's like the weekly. That's
Mhm.
keeping your schedule full, following up with unscheduled patients. And then the second piece of the weekly routine is for the financial coordinator. Weekly, you have to reach out to patients that have overdue account balances and where are your insurance payments, those overdue claims. And maybe weekly you have to check and see, am I sending anybody to collection this week?
Yes.
Do I have to send any letters out this week? So that's all part of that weekly routine where you have to fit those tasks in throughout the week. You might not be doing the same thing every day, but during the week you have to fill up
Yes.
that time.
Taking that time to really have that focus time to work on the business.
Yes.
And I love the recommendation of a secondary huddle
Yeah.
to really orchestrate the day and make sure that everybody on the business team is supporting each other and filling in
Yes.
where necessary so that work, that really important work, can get done. So
Of course.
I
Yeah.
love that, Dayna.
And every team that I've worked with that really allows each other to get some of that off the floor time, they really treasure that because it
Yes.
really lets them focus and not be interrupted. They really cherish that time for
Yes, I mean,
sure.
it's really challenging if you're trying to do that kind of work
Hmm.
at the front desk with the comings and the goings and the phone and the patients and the team members,
Yes. Yeah.
the ability to truly focus and do things efficiently and effectively are extremely challenging. So it's
For
such a great
sure. Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah.
So tell me a little briefly about the monthly piece. I know that you talk about monthly workflow. So any
Mhm.
missing big pieces of that you would recommend practices take a look at?
Monthly is definitely looking at your trends, because we have these systems and processes that we are doing. Numbers tell a story. Numbers tell us if our systems are really working, where we get to celebrate. So every month we get to look at our numbers and see, are we celebrating, or are there maybe things in our systems that we might need to tweak a little bit. So monthly is really looking at trends. We're looking at practice numbers. We're making sure that our, month end, if we have to run a month end, quote month end,
Mhm.
is it running on time and things are happening there. And, so for example, I have like hygiene coordinators or the team member that is kind of accountable to the hygiene schedule. I would want her to be keeping her eye on the patient retention number,
Mhm.
because that's going to tell her if patients are coming in regularly, staying on track. It'll show our doctors if patients are leaving the practice and we might not know it.
Right.
The financial coordinator is going to be wanting to look at her accounts receivable numbers. Are they going up? Are they going down? So that's the monthly routine, is really looking at our numbers. Are we celebrating, or are we tweaking our
Yes.
systems?
I love that. I had a great consultant once tell me, inspect what you expect.
Yes,
And
I
that
love
that
that.
monthly piece sounds like it fits right into his will. Hit what he's recommending is, you have to take the time, and you have to know where to look to see those trends that you
Hmm.
said, to see
Yeah.
what your numbers are telling you. So I think that's tremendous.
Yes.
So the daily, the weekly, the monthly, those are the pieces, workflows that can help your practices be more efficient, less overwhelming, more intentional, and help you stay on track and help you meet the goals that you want to achieve in your practice. I love those recommendations, Dayna. So, any other little pieces before, as we're talking through this, where can they find more information about you, about this kind of instruction or resources that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. Since this is such a popular topic, I do have an on-demand webinar that anyone in your audience can, just your name and email address, you'll get access to the on-demand recording. And then part of that, they will also have a downloadable tip sheet that will also spell out everything for them. If they want a printed piece of paper or something that they can reference back to, they can have that all for free. And when they do give me their name and email, they will get on my email list. I do a podcast, so I also have a podcast that you were on, and so they'll get my podcast, and they'll get my monthly newsletter. And if they ever want to unsubscribe, no worries. But they can have that free on-demand webinar and that downloadable tip sheet that will go through everything that we just talked about today.
So, is that located on your website, Dayna?
So I'll give you a link to that.
Okay, great.
It will be, by the time this podcast goes live, it will be on demand. I'm doing this webinar actually live this
Oh,
week. So by the
wonderful.
time this podcast
Yes.
goes live, it'll be on demand.
Okay, great.
And so I'll have the link available for you and your
Okay.
audience, and they can just watch it anytime they want.
That'd be wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you, Dayna. So yes, Dayna has an amazing podcast of her very own, the High Performing Team podcast. I highly recommend it, not just because I was a guest, but because she really has tremendous guests and does some great instructional episodes as well. As you can see, Dayna is so full of insights and valuable information to help get your team on track. And again, I can't sing her praises high enough. You can find more information on her website, novonee.com. Is that correct, Dayna?
Correct. Yes.
Novonee.
Yes.
And so I recommend that you go seek her out and her resources. And again, thank you for providing the complimentary resources on the workflows for this audience. I know that will be very valuable to them, and we appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you having me on. This was super fun conversation and so relevant to what we're seeing in our industry.
I love it. So thank you for being with me and for taking the time. We're so grateful to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you, to the Jameson Files community, for joining us for another episode. I hope this was valuable to you. If this information and the other episodes you've listened to are valuable, please spread the word, share the Jameson Files with your dental friends and community so that we can be about the business of building healthy, happy lives in the dental profession together. And so with that, be well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. See you next time.